has just begun.
It's a popular notion that we are the sum product of our beliefs and experiences. These experiences have added to our burdens, subtracted from our pleasure, multiplied our problems, and divided our attentions. We control how events affect our lives. The key is knowing how to recognize and reassess your experiences so that they begin adding to your joy, subtracting from your fears, multiplying your freedom, and dividing your burden. Join Kimberly Simon for Revelations and discover a whole new way to do the math. Tuesday nights from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Hazy Radio Network.
Did you know that birthday parties help build confidence in kids?
Yeah. Did you know that giving kids less sugar before bedtime helps them sleep better?
Oh, totally. Did you know that friendly kids have more friends?
Everybody knows that.
Hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
I didn't know that.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Science and paranormal investigation is the least understood pursuits. The Parascience team and their guests will share their knowledge and experience with you to help those who have chosen this course of study to be the best investigators they could be. Join the Parascience team every Friday night from 10 to midnight here on Hazy Radio.
Looking at the world through the wide-angle lens. It's The Broader View with Hazy and Belle Salisbury on the Hazy Radio Network. Now, back to the show.
And welcome back. This is The Broader View with your host, Hazy, and my co-host, Belle Salisbury. And with us, we have Miss Karen Frazier, who, as I said before the break, is an author, a freelance writer, a ghostwriter, an editor, a journalist, with vast experience in sharing stories. A ghostwriter and author, Karen has helped you turn your ideas into a book, blog, or articles you've always wanted to write. She can also help with queries, web content, marketing, and materials. I know she's a jewelry designer. She's a busy soccer mom. She's kind of an all-around doing something constantly. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. You know, I have to tell you, I'm not a soccer mom anymore. Now I'm a golf mom.
You're a
but,
golf
you
mom.
Know, the effect is the same.
I was going to say, golf students and golfers spend enough time on the golf course as they do on the soccer field.
Yeah, the thing is, he doesn't like me to come to his golf matches because he thinks it's weird to have your mom walk around with you when you're golfing with your buds. So
you can't cheer him on, can you?
No, well, I cheer him on from home. It's all good. He's 16 now anyway, and, you know, he doesn't want mom around very often.
So you hide behind the trees while he's out there then?
You know, Zita, I hadn't thought of that. I think
there are ways.
Okay, I'll keep
that in mind.
You've
got some ghost equipment there. You probably have some lenses that you could throw on a camera. And
I do, and
binoculars.
I have, you know, like the microphone that I could sort of aim in his direction too.
See, here we are plotting against your son.
Oh my gosh! Now I know how to be a stalker of my teenage son. That's awesome. Thank you. He'll be thrilled.
Too.
I love it. Well, I want to start out by asking you how you got into all of this. Have you always been interested in the paranormal, or is it just something that you fell into?
Both. How's that for an answer? When I was a kid, I really liked ghost stories, and I was really interested in sort of non-traditional things. So my family was I grew up in the Christian church, and my family has that very strong religious background, and I was the kid in Sunday school that nobody wanted. because I was the one who asked all of the incredibly doubtful questions and thought about things. And, and that, to me, that curiosity as a child drove me to all sorts of things, because if they were telling me in church that it was true that that Jesus came back from the dead, for instance, after 3 days, then surely other things must be true as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just a little funny aside from that, my father tells a story of shortly after. You don't have any kids listening to this show, right?
Of course not.
Okay, so shortly after.
Unless yours are.
No, well,
okay.
he already knows.
Okay.
Shortly after they had told me that there was no Santa Claus when I was a kid, and I was probably about 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that age group, and he was listening up the stairs to me talking to my sisters, and he heard me say to my sisters, if they're lying about this Jesus crap, I'm going to be really mad, because I was mad about the Santa Claus
Yeah,
lie.
yeah.
So I had this really curious mind, and I wanted to find things out, and that caused me to dig into a lot of things. And I mean, I read about everything. I was interested in ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot, and not necessarily as supernatural beings, but I was interested. I wanted to know if it was actually something that was real. Mm-hmm. And so I always had kind of that driving interest. And then I had an interest in other things that were specifically related to the afterlife, because I don't actually say that I do I'm a paranormal researcher, although that's part of what I do. I call myself an afterlife researcher because that really encompasses more of what I do. And I can see the roots of that starting when I was a teenager, and I was looking into reincarnation and near-death experiences. And I was very drawn to to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's works and Raymond Moody's works. And that started fairly young. And then when I lived in my first apartment when I was 21 and had some just crazy things happen there, then I also started to really think about ghosts.
Was there a particular instance that happened either in your young life or even when you moved out into your own place that sparked your interest to delve into this more than you did before?
Yeah. Well, so it did, but it took me 20 years to actually start to do it, because there was a 20-year period of absolute denial. So I write about this in my book, in a chapter in my book, Dancing with the Afterlife. I call it Wide Awake at the Super 8. And in that chapter, I talk about being 21 years old. I was a newlywed, and I was married to a sailor, a submariner, a guy who was a nuclear, a Navy nuke. And he would go out to sea on a nuclear submarine and be gone for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And this was the first place I'd ever really lived alone, because I went straight from college to marriage. And within a month of us being married, he was out to sea. And we were living in this little World War II Navy housing apartment. It wasn't Navy housing anymore. They'd turned it into apartments, but it had been officers' housing. Okay. And it was in Bremerton, Washington. And strange things started to happen in that apartment. And it all culminated in one night when a bunch of cupboards in my kitchen actually flew open. They had been latched and the doors flew open. And then somebody walked into my bedroom, and I was laying in bed had been reading, and I read on my side with my back to the door, and somebody walked across my room and they sat down on my bed, and I'm looking away thinking, go away, go away, go away. And they actually leaned over and whispered, I love you, in my ear. And I could feel the bed depress. And I could feel like when somebody whispers in your ear, you know how it kind of flutters your hair on your cheek? So, yeah, I fled the apartment in terror that night, and I spent the night at the Super 8 motel. And
I would have too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I came back after work the next day in broad daylight, and I walked into my apartment, and I walked into my bedroom, and now recall my husband's out to sea and nobody else lives in the apartment with me. And there was a 6-foot Godzilla, an inflatable Godzilla that normally sat in the corner of our living room because we were really good at decorating back then. And it was sitting in the middle of my bed.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when my husband came home, we moved.
I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? Oh, I don't know if I could have even gone back.
I did. I lived there, and I lived there with it and with those things. And I had at the time, I mean, I'd read ghost stories and stuff, but they were very much everything, reincarnation, all of that in my mind was very compartmentalized into fantasy stories.
Yes.
I mean, it would be reading a fairy tale to me. Those things were fascinating, but they were fairy tales. They weren't real. And so when these things started to happen, I thought, well, I must just be overly anxious because I'm living alone or something. And I did a lot of rationalization, and it was pretty hard to rationalize while I still lived there.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, but as soon as I got out, then I spent the next 20 years convincing myself that those things weren't real. And then we moved into this house and 10 years ago, and I hadn't had anything in the interim. And 3 days before we had purchased the house, and this was back when everybody was buying houses, so it'd take forever to get your loan to go through 10 years ago.
Yep.
And so we wound up having to live in a hotel for several weeks before our house was ready because we'd sold our other house. And 3 days before we moved into this house, I dreamed the house was haunted. And I woke up and I thought, oh, crap. And I thought, no, I can't be. And by God, the house is haunted. So that brought me back to the whole thing 20 years ago. And it made me start to look at all sorts of things that have happened in the past 20 years that I really ignored or tried to explain away.
I mean, you do go through that, or you try to rationalize that. Did it really happen, or am I creating my own story in my head? Or
I still do that.
You know, am I dreaming this? And maybe in my sleep I put this 6-foot Godzilla on the bed and didn't realize it. You start doing that, and you almost make yourself nuts trying to rationalize it. How do you, or have you, come to terms with it all now that your home is haunted?
Well, so the denial is strong in this one. So the way that I've always sought to deal with everything in my life through rational thought, through logic, through scientific reasoning, always. And the way that I came to terms with it was by doing exactly the opposite of that. I started to trust myself. I started to trust my intuition. I started to trust my experiences. And I started to trust my senses. Now, that doesn't mean that my mind is so open that my brain is going to fall out. But I do trust the experiences that I have now, because it took a heck of a lot more work rationalizing everything away. And, you know, we talk about a lot in the paranormal Occam's razor, and that the simplest explanation is usually the right explanation, all things being equal. Well, all things being equal, sometimes the rational explanation is that our consciousness survives death, and that can manifest in various ways, including as hauntings.
So when you started in with all this, and when you finally accepted it and, as you say, rationalized with it, did you start investigating your own home then to find out the core of what was going on? I would
never, ever, ever recommend anybody ever investigate their own home unless you would like to make it more active. Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, we advise our clients, I'm with South Sound Paranormal Research, and we advise our clients, unless you want the interaction to pick up, don't investigate your own home.
Right.
But I started to